morning, sweetie birdie.
I'm out of coffee.
You're out of coffee.
In the past, brands sold cigarettes using doctors, spanked wives for bad coffee, and made women wash with disinfectant. These ads were real, and they would never be allowed today. Let's uncover the most shocking commercials that actually aired. Number 20, the Daisy ad, 1964. What if a single TV commercial could scare an entire nation into changing their vote? That's exactly what happened in 1964. The ad was simple, a little girl plucking petals off a daisy. But what followed changed political advertising forever. The Daisy ad aired during the presidential campaign of Lyndon B. Johnson against Barry Goldwater. And it wasn't your typical political ad. The scene starts with a young girl counting daisy petals in a field. Then her innocent voice is drowned out by a countdown. 10, 9, 8, before boom, a mushroom cloud explosion fills the screen. The message? If you vote for Goldwater, nuclear war could be next. There was no mention of Goldwater's name, but the implication was terrifying. Johnson's voiceover follows. These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the darkness. The screen fades to black with a final warning. Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home. Goldwater's supporters were furious, calling it the lowest form of political fear-mongering. But guess what? The ad only aired once, and it worked. Johnson won by a landslide. This commercial changed the way politicians use fear to manipulate voters, something we still see today. Although it was only broadcast one time, the ad became one of the most controversial and effective political ads in history. It's now studied in political science classes as an example of how to weaponize fear in elections.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Number 19, Pepsi Kendall Jenner ad 2017. What happens when a global brand tries to tackle social justice, but ends up offending everyone instead? Enter the Pepsi ad featuring Kendall Jenner. A commercial that was supposed to promote peace turned into one of the biggest PR disasters in advertising history. The ad features Kendall Jenner in the middle of a high-fashion photo shoot when she suddenly notices a group of protesters in the streets. The protesters are all smiling, holding signs like "Join the conversation," but oddly, no actual messages. Inspired, Jenner tears off her blonde wig, wipes off her lipstick, and joins the movement, as if that's all it takes to become an activist. Then comes the most tone-deaf moment. She walks up to a stoic police officer, hands him a can of Pepsi, and boom, the tension magically dissolves. The crowd cheers. Protest solved, racism ended, world peace achieved, all thanks to a can of soda. The backlash was immediate. Critics accused Pepsi of trivializing real-life protests, especially Black Lives Matter demonstrations, where tensions with police have led to violence. Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., even tweeted, "If only Daddy had known about the power of Pepsi." Pepsi pulled the ad within 24 hours and issued an apology, admitting they missed the mark, but by then, the damage was done. Pepsi reportedly spent millions of dollars on this ad, only to delete it within a day. It remains one of the biggest advertising blunders ever. 18. Hoover vacuum cleaners, 1950s. Imagine waking up on Christmas morning running to the tree and unwrapping a vacuum cleaner. Sounds thrilling, right? Well, in the 1950s, Hoover thought this was the perfect gift for women, and they made sure everyone knew it. One of their most infamous ads featured a smiling woman lying on the floor admiring her new Hoover vacuum, with the tagline, "Christmas morning she'll be happier with a Hoover." The implication? A clean house is what every woman truly wants. The message didn't stop there. Other Hoover ads took it a step further, suggesting that husbands should surprise their wives with a vacuum cleaner because nothing says romance like household chores. Today, this would be seen as wildly sexist, reinforcing outdated gender roles that define women by their domestic responsibilities. But back then, it was completely normal. In fact, vacuum cleaner sales surged during the holiday season, proving that plenty of husbands actually took this advice. But here's where it gets funny. In 2022, a Reddit thread surfaced where users shared stories of men who actually tried this stunt today. One guy proudly gifted his wife a vacuum and ended up sleeping on the couch. Lesson learned. Hoover wasn't alone. Ads for irons, dishwashers, and kitchen appliances dominated the 1950s holiday season. It was all about keeping the house clean, whether women liked it or not.
These high-button boots of grandmother's were all right in her day, but they're too old-fashioned for today's smart modern woman. She wants the newest, the latest, the smartest. That's what she wants in a cleaner, too. The newest, the latest, the smart new Hoover Constellation. It makes other cleaners look as old-fashioned as grandmother's high-button boots. See how efficiently it cleans, too. With its double-stretch hose, the Hoover Constellation reaches twice the distance to clean twice the space and follows wherever you go, floating on its own cushion of air. And look at the cleaning tools, all designed to do your household chores with modern-day efficiency. Every woman with young ideas wants the exciting new Hoover Constellation.
Number 17. Pond's Cold Cream, 1920s. What if I told you that beauty ads once convinced women that their own skin wasn't good enough unless it was lighter? In the 1920s, Pond's Cold Cream wasn't just about skincare, it was about selling colorism, and the message was crystal clear: whiter is better. One of their ads featured a before and after comparison of a woman's face. Her before skin tone was darker, while the after was significantly lighter. The tagline? For a clearer, fairer complexion. But here's where it gets worse. Ads like these weren't just about looking good. They suggested that a woman's social status, desirability, and even marriage prospects depended on her skin tone.
Tired of expensive, low-effort script writers for your YouTube channel? Autoscripter.ai is the ultimate solution. Say goodbye to low-quality, poorly retention amateur scripts that fail to generate thousands of views for your channel. At a fraction of the cost, Autoscripter.ai helps your videos go viral. In just 3 steps, Autoscripter.ai creates a polished script tailored to your needs. Just input your title concept, select your tone and style. The intuitive interface makes editing and refining effortless, fast, smart, and trusted by hundreds of satisfied users who have already discovered the amazing tool. Start your free trial today and watch Autoscripter.ai transform your YouTube channel. Just click the link in the video description below now.
Women of color were particularly affected as these messages reinforced harmful beauty standards that still exist today. Even in the 1950s and beyond, Pond's and other brands like Fair and Lovely, now rebranded as Glow and Lovely, continued pushing skin lightening creams in various markets, especially in Asia and Africa, where colonial-era beauty ideals had already left deep scars. Today, many of these brands have tried to distance themselves from their past, changing product names and marketing. But let's be real, those deep-rooted beauty standards don't disappear overnight. Even Marilyn Monroe was reportedly advised to use skin whitening creams early in her career because pale skin was considered more marketable in Hollywood during the 1940s. Number 16. Drummond Sweaters, 1960s. Imagine flipping through a magazine and seeing an ad for sweaters. But instead of a cozy winter vibe, you see a man holding a woman by the neck with her sweater stretched like a noose. Sounds disturbing, right? Well, that's exactly what Drummond sweaters thought would be a great way to sell clothes in the 1960s. The ad featured a man standing over a woman, gripping her sweater tight around her neck while she looked up at him helplessly. The tagline, "Men are better than women," as if the image alone wasn't problematic enough. At the time, many ads casually glorified violence against women, treating it as playful or romantic. But today, an ad like this wouldn't just be controversial, it would get a brand canceled overnight. Domestic violence awareness wasn't as widespread back then, and ads like these normalized the idea that women were submissive objects of male control. It was part of a larger pattern where fashion ads often showed men in dominant, even aggressive roles, while women were portrayed as passive and powerless. Drummond never issued an apology because, back then, there was no backlash. But if this ad resurfaced today, social media would explode in outrage within minutes. A 2014 fashion campaign by Saint Laurent came under fire for a similar dominance theme, proving that some brands still push this harmful imagery today. Number 15, Goodyear tires, 1960s. Imagine a commercial telling women that they're so bad at driving that their only hope for survival is better tires. That's exactly the message Goodyear pushed in the 1960s. The ad featured a worried husband looking directly at the camera, saying, "When there's no man around, Goodyear should be," implying that women were helpless behind the wheel unless their tires could somehow compensate for their lack of driving skills. One print ad even went further, showing a fearful woman gripping the steering wheel with the caption, "If your wife drives, get her the safest tires you can buy." Because apparently, keeping your wife alive was just another responsibility for the husband. Sexist? Absolutely. But back then, society saw women as incapable of handling technology, machinery, or even making their own decisions. This wasn't just Goodyear. Many car brands in the 50s and the 60s ran patronizing ads that treated female drivers as a danger to themselves and others. Fast forward to today, and while women are statistically safer drivers than men, the stereotype of the bad female driver still lingers. In 2012, a Chinese driving school sparked outrage for launching a separate driving program just for women, claiming they needed special attention behind the wheel. The backlash forced them to shut it down.
Depending on how you drive and your car's condition, you can get incredible mileage from the Goodyear Custom Wide Tread Polyglass tire.
I've got 32,000 miles on my tires.
I've got 41,000 miles on my Polyglass.
But Polyglass means more than mileage when your wife has to drive alone. When a woman's at the wheel, Polyglass means more than mileage. If it doesn't say Goodyear, it can't be Polyglass. A name so different, it's registered.
Number 14, Playtex bras, 1970s. What if I told you there was a time when women's faces didn't even matter in commercials, only their bodies did? That's exactly how Playtex marketed their bras in 1970s. Their ads featured women modeling bras, but their faces were completely cropped out, reducing them to nothing but torsos and underwear. The message was loud and clear. Women weren't individuals, they were just body parts to be displayed. One ad even had the tagline, "Nothing comes between a woman and her Playtex." But ironically, the ad itself completely erased the women wearing them. It wasn't just Playtex. Many lingerie brands at the time treated women as lifeless mannequins, emphasizing the product while ignoring the person. The problem? This dehumanized women, turning them into objects rather than individuals. And even though society didn't question it much back then, today it's seen as a textbook example of objectification in advertising. But here's the kicker. Some modern brands still use faceless women in ads, proving that this outdated marketing trick hasn't fully disappeared. Victoria's Secret was heavily criticized in the 2010s for its unrealistic body standards, leading to a major drop in sales. They eventually rebranded in 2021, replacing their supermodel angels with more diverse and relatable women. Number 13, Lysol douche, 1920s through the 1940s. What if I told you that Lysol, yes, the disinfectant, was once marketed as a feminine hygiene product? And even worse, they convinced women that if they didn't use it, their husbands would leave them. During the 1920s to 1940s, Lysol ran shocking ads promoting feminine freshness, a coded way of telling women that their natural bodies were unacceptable. One ad warned, "Don't risk your marriage," implying that if a wife didn't use Lysol as a vaginal cleanser, she might end up divorced. It gets crazier. Lysol wasn't just ineffective, it was dangerous. The active ingredient in early Lysol contained cresol, a toxic substance that would cause burns, infections, and even poisoning. Yet, millions of women believed the advertising and used it anyway. Doctors and women's health advocates later exposed the dangers, but by then, the damage had already been done. Lysol quietly stopped marketing it for feminine use, but never officially acknowledged the harm it caused. Looking back, this is a chilling example of how companies preyed on women's insecurities to sell products, even at the cost of their health. Lysol wasn't alone. Other brands like Zonite also pushed chemical douches. The scariest part? Some of these products were labeled as safe and doctor approved, despite causing serious medical issues.
Many women struggle with a secret that scares men away. Marianne is one of those women. But Lysol can help. Lysol is a concentrated germ killer that works as a birth control and douche fragrance that covers feminine odor. With this product, get your womanly hygiene under control.
Number 12, Love's Baby Soft, 1975. What if I told you a perfume ad once sexualized little girls, and nobody thought it was a problem? That's exactly what Love's Baby Soft did in 1975, and the backlash today would be instant. The ad featured a young girl in heavy makeup, pouting at the camera, with the tagline, "Innocence is sexier than you think." Let that sink in. They were literally marketing child innocence as something seductive and using it to sell perfume. But it didn't stop there. The TV commercials showed young girls giggling in frilly outfits, whispering in soft, breathy voices. These suggestive poses and flirty tone made it clear the goal was to blend childhood and sex appeal. Today, an ad like that would be ripped off the air immediately. But back then, society didn't bat an eye. This was pre-Me Too, pre-social media, and most brands weren't held accountable for hypersexualizing young girls. Years later, marketing experts called out the ad for being wildly inappropriate, but the damage was done. It's now considered one of the most disturbing perfume ads ever made. Love's Baby Soft was marketed as a starter perfume for young girls, but its ads blurred the line between youthfulness and adult sensuality, something that still sparks huge debates in advertising today.
There's one person nobody can resist, and that's a baby. So Love made Baby Soft with the innocent scent of a cuddly, clean baby that grew up very sexy, informing bath, body lotion, body powder, and body mist. So innocent it may well be the sexiest fragrance around. Love's Baby Soft, because innocence is sexier than you think. For your baby at Christmas.
Number 11, Maxwell House Coffee, 1960s. What if I told you there was a time when bad coffee could get a woman in trouble? Literally. In the 1960s, Maxwell House Coffee ran an ad campaign that implied serving bad coffee was a wife's biggest failure. One commercial showed a husband grimacing at his wife's coffee, then scolding her like a child. The tagline, "If your husband finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee," the not-so-subtle message, "A bad cup of coffee could put your marriage in jeopardy." Another version featured a wife nervously serving her husband coffee while he inspected it like a strict professor grading an exam. If it wasn't up to his standards, he would sigh, roll his eyes, or even give a stern lecture. The solution? Buy Maxwell House Coffee and keep your husband happy. These commercials reinforced the idea that a woman's worth was tied to how well she served her husband, especially in the kitchen. Even though they were supposed to be humorous, the underlying message was clear. Women exist to please men, and failure to do so has consequences. These ads weren't unique. Many 1950s and 60s commercials portrayed wives as incompetent, dependent, and in constant fear of disappointing their husbands. If these aired today, social media would explode in outrage within minutes.
Good morning, dear.
Good morning, sweetie birdie.
I'm out of coffee.
You're out of coffee. Isn't that wonderful? Out of coffee?
What a time to run out. And why run out? Now there's a new giant-size instant Maxwell House.
Number 10. Fairy Soap, 1900s. What if I told you there was a soap ad that implied washing could change your race? That's exactly what Fairy Soap did in the early 1900s, and it remains one of the most blatantly racist ads in history. One of the most shocking versions featured a black child being scrubbed with soap, revealing a clean, lighter-skinned baby underneath. The message? Whiter is cleaner, and darker skin is dirty. The ad wasn't subtle. It literally suggested that blackness was something that needed to be washed away. And unfortunately, Fairy Soap wasn't alone. Many brands, from Pears Soap to NK Fairbanks Soap, used similar racist imagery, depicting dark skin as something undesirable and in need of cleansing. This kind of advertising reinforced dangerous stereotypes that linked whiteness to purity and beauty while dehumanizing people of color. It wasn't just about selling soap, it was about selling an ideology that fueled racism for decades. Even worse, ads like these were wildly successful because they tapped into existing racial prejudices. Many white consumers believed in the false association between cleanliness and skin color, making these products highly profitable. Even in the 1960s and beyond, some brands still marketed skin lightening creams using outdated colorist messaging. While these ads are no longer accepted, colorism remains a huge issue in beauty standards worldwide. Number 9. Frito Bandito, 1967. What if I told you that a major snack brand once used a cartoon character to mock an entire culture? Meet the Frito Bandito, the racist mascot that somehow made it to national television. In 1967, Fritos introduced the Frito Bandito, a mustached, sombrero-wearing, gun-toting Mexican stereotype who spoke in a heavy, exaggerated accent and sang about stealing Fritos. His theme song, a parody of Cielito Lindo, where he gleefully bragged about snatching chips from unsuspecting people. If that sounds offensive, it's because it was. The National Mexican-American Anti-Defamation Committee immediately called it out for perpetuating harmful stereotypes, portraying Mexicans as lazy, sneaky thieves. They demanded Fritos remove the character, but it took until 1971 for the company to finally retire him. Despite the controversy, Frito Bandito was hugely popular at the time. Kids collected Bandito pencil erasers, and the character even appeared in commercials alongside big Hollywood names. But today, this kind of branding would get instantly canceled. Frito-Lay never formally apologized, but they quietly erased the Bandito from their history, hoping people would forget. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Frito Bandito was voiced by Mel Blanc, the legendary voice actor behind Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig. Crazy, right? Even icons of entertainment history were involved in some of the most problematic ads ever made.
Hello, senor. I am the Frito Bandito. Oh, don't be afraid. I am not going to steal your Fritos corn chips. I buy them from you, okay? See, I give you silver. No silver? Okay, I give you gold. You don't like gold neither? Maybe you like better some lead, huh?
Citizens, protect yourselves. Never buy one bag of crunchy Fritos corn chips. Always buy two, and hide one for you. Who knows? There may be a Frito Bandito in your house.
Number 8. Camel cigarettes, 1940s. What if I told you that doctors once recommended cigarettes for your health? That's exactly what Camel cigarettes claimed in their infamous 1940s campaign, and believe it or not, people actually believed it. Their ads proudly declared, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. To sell the idea, they featured men in white lab coats, stethoscopes in hand, smiling as they puffed away, as if lighting up a cigarette was part of a healthy lifestyle. The campaign was based on a so-called survey of doctors, but here's the catch. The survey was conducted by a tobacco company at medical conventions where they handed out free Camels and then asked doctors which brand they preferred. Totally unbiased, right? People bought into it. If doctors were smoking Camels, how could they be bad for you? But by the 1960s, when studies proved smoking caused lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema, this ad became one of the most misleading campaigns in history. Eventually, the government cracked down on false health claims in cigarette ads, forcing tobacco companies to stop using doctors, athletes, and even Santa Claus to promote smoking. But the damage had already been done. Millions had picked up the habit. Even as late as the 1950s, cigarette brands marketed smoking as a weight loss tool for women, with slogans like, reach for a lucky instead of a sweet. Unbelievable.
You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, what cigarette do you smoke, doctor? Once again, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how Camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good-tasting a cigarette can be.
Number 7, Aunt Jemima Pancake Mix, 1950s. What if I told you that one of America's most famous breakfast brands was rooted in racist stereotypes? For decades, Aunt Jemima Pancake Mix used imagery that reinforced harmful portrayals of black women. The character of Aunt Jemima was inspired by the mammy stereotype, a smiling headscarf-wearing black woman depicted as a happy servant devoted to cooking for white families. The image was comforting to white audiences, but deeply offensive to black Americans, as it romanticized slavery-era depictions of black women as content, subservient caretakers. The brand's original mascot was based on Nancy Green, a former enslaved woman hired to portray Aunt Jemima at events, flipping pancakes and entertaining crowds. She became the face of the brand, but her role in the paycheck never reflected the enormous success of the product. Despite growing criticism, Quaker Oats kept the Aunt Jemima branding for over 130 years. It wasn't until 2020, during the Black Lives Matter movement, that the company finally retired the logo and name, renaming the brand Pearl Milling Company. Even though it took over a century, this change was a huge milestone in recognizing how deep-rooted racial stereotypes still exist in marketing. In 1893, Nancy Green was hired to promote Aunt Jemima pancakes at the World's Fair, where she served thousands of people. But despite being the face of a national brand, she never received wealth or recognition. Number 6, Old Milwaukee's Swedish Bikini Team, 1991. What if I told you that a beer commercial once featured a group of bikini-clad women whose only purpose was to serve men? That's exactly what Old Milwaukee Beer did in 1990 with their infamous Swedish Bikini Team campaign. The commercial showed a group of ordinary guys stranded in the wilderness, miserable and bored, until out of nowhere, 5 tall, blonde women in tiny bikinis appeared, ready to hand them beers and rescue them. The message? Drinking Old Milwaukee turned your dull life into a male fantasy. The Swedish Bikini Team wasn't just in commercials. They became a full-on marketing gimmick, appearing at events, beer promotions, and even TV shows. But the backlash came fast. Women's rights groups called out the campaign for blatantly objectifying women, and even some beer drinkers found it ridiculous. By 1992, Old Milwaukee pulled the campaign, realizing that turning women into silent beer-serving props wasn't the best marketing move. But the damage was done. The ad became a symbol of sexist beer advertising from the 80s and 90s. The women in the Swedish Bikini team were actually American actresses, not Swedish. After the campaign ended, they sued Old Milwaukee for failing to properly compensate them, proving that the brand didn't just objectify them, they also ripped them off.
Guys, doesn't get any better than this.
Bob Pullum was wrong, because when a crate of lobsters fell from the sky, it got somewhat better. And when the Swedish Bikini team dropped by, it got a little better. And when an Old Milwaukee truck showed up, it most certainly got better. Old Milwaukee and Old Milwaukee Light. It just doesn't get any better than this.
Number 5, Hardee's Burger Commercial, 2003. What if I told you that a fast food commercial once featured a woman washing a car in slow motion just to sell a burger? And that's exactly what Hardee's and its sister company Carl's Jr. did in 2003, and it sparked one of the biggest debates about sexism in advertising. The ad featured a scantily clad woman sensually licking sauce off her fingers, biting into a messy burger, and seductively spraying herself with water while washing a car. The camera focused on her body, not the burger. The message: if you eat this, you're irresistible. Hardee's and later Carl's Jr. doubled down on this marketing strategy, featuring celebrities like Paris Hilton and Kate Upton in even more provocative ads. The company defended the commercials, saying, "We believe in bold, fun advertising," but critics weren't laughing. Women's groups slammed the ads for objectifying women, while others pointed out the bizarre disconnect between a greasy burger and a hypersexualized model. Even comedian Jon Stewart mocked the campaign, calling it fast food softcore. By 2017, after years of backlash, the company completely rebranded, ditching the sexist marketing and admitting maybe it was time to grow up. Despite the controversy, Hardee's sales skyrocketed during these ad campaigns, proving that sex still sells, even when it makes no sense. Number 4, Chase and Sanborn Coffee, 1950s. What if I told you there was a time when spanking your wife for bad coffee was considered funny in advertising? That's exactly what happened in Chase and Sanborn Coffee's infamous 1950s print ad, and it's still one of the most shockingly sexist ads ever made. The ad featured a husband holding his wife over his knee, mid-spank, as she looked terrified. The tagline, "If your husband ever finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee," the implication, serving stale coffee was a punishable offense. This ad wasn't a joke. It reflected real societal norms at the time. Women were expected to please their husbands at all costs, and failure, even in something as small as making coffee, was grounds for humiliation and punishment. Back then, advertisers often used physical punishment as humor. Other brands had ads featuring men threatening their wives for making household mistakes. It was part of a larger cultural idea that men had authority over women, and advertising played a role in reinforcing that power dynamic. Today, this ad would be banned instantly and trigger massive backlash. But in the 1950s, people barely blinked. Ads like this weren't rare. Other coffee brands, kitchen appliance companies, and even car manufacturers ran similar campaigns, all built around the idea that women's primary role was to serve their husbands perfectly, or else.
The other woman. She's nice, and she really cares. About his dinner, about him, and about his coffee. That's why she starts his morning with Chase and Sanborn, the heftier coffee. Heftier flavor, heftier aroma. But there's still the kind of woman who serves whatever's handy. Are you this woman, or the other woman? Chase and Sanborn, the heftier coffee, for the other woman who really cares.
Number 3, Kellogg's Pep Vitamins, 1930s. What if I told you that a cereal company once used violence against dolls to sell vitamins. That's exactly what Kellogg's Pep did in the 1930s, running an ad so shocking it would be instantly banned today. The ad featured a young white boy holding a slingshot, grinning as he aimed at a black doll. The message: eat Kellogg's Pep vitamins and you'll have the strength to knock things down. It wasn't blatantly racist, it was dangerously irresponsible, essentially encouraging kids to use violence for fun. The idea that harming others, or even objects symbolizing them, was acceptable wasn't just a marketing gimmick. It reflected the deep-seated racial prejudices at the time. This wasn't an isolated incident. Many brands in the early 20th century used offensive caricatures to sell products, often portraying Black people, Native Americans, and other minorities in degrading ways. For decades, advertising reinforced stereotypes that dehumanized entire communities. Kellogg's eventually dropped the ad, but they never publicly acknowledged its offensive history. Today, companies face massive backlash for even minor insensitivities, but back then, brands got away with shockingly racist messaging. Even as late as the 1950s, little black Sambo imagery appeared in advertising and children's books, proving that racist branding wasn't just tolerated, it was mainstream. Number 2, Van Heusen ties, 1950s. What if I told you that a men's fashion brand once advertised ties by showing women serving breakfast on their knees? And that's exactly what Van Heusen did in the 1950s, pushing a message that would be instantly canceled today. One of their most infamous ads featured a well-dressed man reclining in bed, looking smug, while his wife knelt beside him, serving him breakfast on a tray. The tagline: "For a man's world," the implication: men are superior and women exist to cater to them. This wasn't an isolated ad. Van Heusen ran multiple campaigns reinforcing traditional gender roles, portraying men as powerful decision makers and women as obedient housewives. The message was clear: men work, women serve. At this time, this kind of advertising was completely normal. The 1950s were an era when women were expected to aspire to be perfect wives, and brands capitalized on that societal pressure. But today, an ad like this would spark outrage instantly. Eventually, Van Heusen moved away from this messaging, but their old ads still serve as a disturbing reminder of how advertising once treated women as second-class citizens. Even in the 1920s, brands like Burger King faced backlash for tone-deaf ads, like their infamous tweet, "Women belong in the kitchen." Turns out, sexist marketing never fully disappeared. Number 1, Tipalet cigarettes, 1969. What if I told you that a cigarette brand once claimed blowing smoke in a woman's face would make her desire you? That's exactly what Tipalet cigarettes did in 1969, and it remains one of the most bizarrely sexist ads in history. The ad showed a man confidently exhaling smoke into a woman's face, while she closed her eyes in pleasure as if mesmerized. The tagline: "Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere." Yep, that was the actual slogan. The message: women are so weak-willed that secondhand smoke is enough to seduce them. It was misogynistic, creepy, and scientifically ridiculous, but back then, sexist marketing was everywhere, and smoking was still considered cool and manly. This ad wasn't just sexist, it was wildly irresponsible. By 1969, medical research had already proven the dangers of smoking, but cigarette brands still pushed the idea that smoking made men irresistible. The backlash came later. By the 1970s, restrictions on tobacco advertising forced companies to tone down their messaging, and today an ad like this would be instantly banned. Even in the 2000s, Hollywood movies continued to glamorize smoking, with studies showing that teens who saw characters smoke were more likely to start themselves. Some bad marketing ideas never fully die. And that's a wrap. Which ad shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. If you love crazy history like this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and check out these other videos on your screen now.